passengers travelling to the interpretation station, please alight now.
Episode 6 of the interpretation station is called to order. Please take your seats. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the interpretation station for episode 6. As my trusty assistant informed you, Ludmilla, what an episode we've got for you today. Yes, it's the one, the only Russian Federation. Okay, enough of that. That was just a bit of an intro for you. Yeah, we've got the big guns out today. We're doing things a bit differently. In preparation, as I say, I have my matryoshka, Ludmilla. Admittedly, I have to admit she was actually bought in Kazakhstan, so I'm cheating a bit. And I've got to admit that the old bandana here, the Russian bandana, it's actually, if you turn it around, it's a Serbian bandana, but I turned it around upside down. Works just as well. Okay, so not to distract you. So we've got the big guns out. I'm doing things differently this time because I will actually be today the guinea pig for today. I will be doing a statement for you, and then I'll be self-critiquing myself. And it's not just any statement that we've got on, but no, we've got, as I say, if Russia today, they're really the sort of pantomime villain everywhere, aren't they? Well, it's not just Russia, but if you were to have a pantomime featuring all the greatest pantomime villains of all time, then, well, in fact, when doing something of this nature, it's probably not a bad idea to have maybe the charter open in front of you, or at least the preamble, the most important bit. Here we have it here. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom, and for these ends to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbours, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used save in the common interest, and to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Accordingly, our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, who have exhibited their full powers, found to be in good and due form, have agreed to the present Charter of the United Nations, and do hereby establish an international organization to be known as the United Nations. So there's a lot of good classic UN vocabulary here, things that come up often, untold war that brought untold sorrow to mankind. It's a good one. Maintaining international peace and security, that's a crucial phrase to know. Practice tolerance. Employ into the international machinery. Yeah, so it's a good. For something like this, I would have the charter open in front of me because there's a good chance that Putin might refer to specific excerpts from it. Okay, so we've said COVID. 75th anniversary of the Charter. I guess another priority for the Russians is conflicts around the world, relations with the United States. That's generally always the big priority, isn't it? So what are the current conflicts ongoing? I mean, Syria is still sort of rumbling on. It's not been quite as much in the news, I think, this year as it has been in previous years, but there's certainly still stuff going on there. We've got Libya, which is also pretty relevant. I think that Russia has its proxies fighting there, as do the other major powers. Libya, of course, was an old Russian ally, so I think they're pretty interested in developments there. You have Yemen also. I think now this was done before the Armenia and Azerbaijan war kicked off in Nagorno-Karabakh, so I think probably won't talk about that. As I say, this just preceded it slightly. So those are the main conflicts going on. What about relations with the US? Not very good, I would have said, in general. It's always you've got the various nuclear treaties between the two countries. You have the START treaties, the big one. Now, I think there's one that the US recently withdrew from. I can't remember if it was this year or last year. The INF treaty, the Treaty on Intermediate Range Nuclear Weapons. Yeah, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. So the INF Treaty, be a useful little intro for you. It's on the elimination of intermediate range and short range missiles. So the Russians call it the DRSMD. Договор о ликвидации ракет средней и меньшей дальности. This is an important treaty, not as quite high profile as the START treaties, but it's important on arms control. Okay, so it tells you here, President Donald Trump announced on the 20th of October 2018 that he was withdrawing the US from the treaty due to supposed Russian non-compliance. So it's still pretty relevant. That wasn't that long ago, so it'd be no surprise if Putin was to refer to that as well. So I think that more or less covers I think those are going to be the three priorities that he touches on. Then COVID, the 75th anniversary, and international relations, relations with the US. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the recording. By the way, for you, what I'm going to do also put in the description box for you the links to all the links to the recording, the link to the hard copy of Putin's statement for you to download and to do yourself. Follow along the text, look at the text, and then watch the program and follow along with me and see what things you can learn from me. So anyway, yeah, with that, wish me luck. I'm going into the lion's den with Vlad. Hopefully, I'll come out the other side. See you soon. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm back, having gone toe-to-toe with Vladimir, my friend Vladimir. I've lived to tell the tale at least, and so yeah, let's have a look. Let's have a look at how I did, and we're gonna see. I'm gonna be assessing myself, see what I could have done better. It was some of the things I predicted came up. As I said, it was only the first 6 minutes, so there was quite a bit about COVID as I predicted, and also about the 75th anniversary of the UN. In terms of conflicts, relations with the US, we didn't really get to that part of it. I suspect, I think that's touched on in the second half of his statement. But so I got two out of the three that I predicted. So yeah, without any further ado, so here we go.
Distinguished Mr. President, distinguished Secretary General, colleagues, Ladies and gentlemen, this year the international community marks two, without exaggeration, historic milestones: the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II and the creation of the United Nations.
Okay, so a pretty straightforward start there. They like to say the Russians без преувеличения, so without exaggeration. Um, I guess we don't say it as much in English, but in Russian they use it. So, and I said historic jubilee. I said milestones. I could probably just have said milestones without putting in the historic. The end of World War II and the creation of the UN.
It's impossible to overstate the significance of those two interrelated events.
I think I would have preferred here if I had said perhaps those two. Well, literally, it's if you look here, the significance of those forever interconnected events. But so I said interrelated, which is all right. Переоценить, of course, overstate, overemphasize, whatever you prefer.
In 1945, Nazism was destroyed. That ideology of aggression and hatred and the spirit of unity, of being allies, understanding of the price that was paid for a common victory allowed us to build the post-World War order.
Okay, so I remember doing this, and I didn't hear сокращенная идеология агрессии, so I sort of continued it naturally. Nazism was destroyed, the ideology of aggression and hatred. So yeah, сокрушена would be crushed. Дух союзничества. So I paraphrased this a bit in English, didn't I? I talk about being allies. Now, on reflection, I perhaps would have preferred saying comradeship or spirit of comradeship, the spirit of alliance. Oh, I said unity, didn't I? I said unity, which is okay, but I think in this context, perhaps comradeship would have been quite good. And then, as I say, I skipped this little bit. Понимание той громадной цены. Or certainly miss громадной, sort of the huge, an understanding of the huge price that was paid in ensuring victory. And of course, the послевоенный миропорядок is the post-war order, post-war world order. On we go.
And its crucial foundation was the UN Charter.
Crucial foundation. Like I say, I didn't prepare that long. It's okay. You know what they like to talk about the charter being? They like to talk about being the cornerstone. Its cornerstone was the UN Charter. That would have been the best solution. Anyway.
Which to this date remains the main source of international law. I'm convinced that the current Jubilee means that we must recall the unshakable principles of state relations.
Okay, a couple of interesting things here. Нынешний юбилей. Okay, I think I just said the Jubilee, it's an anniversary, isn't it? Now, okay, in Russian they say обязывает нас вспомнить. So literally, it means that forces us to remember. Now the thing is, I think that's what I think I said. Means that we need to remember. Now this is in Russian or in other languages. Sometimes you've got this choice, haven't you, between mirroring the original, which would be to say something like forces us, makes us remember, or giving the natural rendering. What would we say in English? You know, in English, maybe we would say that this anniversary, say, reminds us of, okay, the principles in the Charter, offers us the opportunity to recall. So yeah, you've got this, you've got forever this conflict between the mirror translation and the natural, and often the natural one is often the ones that sounds nicer. Okay, and then This is another one of these classic Russian gerundive constructions. О зафиксированных в уставе о неприходящих принципах. Okay, so it reminds us of, I think I skip зафиксирование and I just say the, so I said I think the unshakable principles in the charter. This is a good one. Неприходящих, and you know the best solution there is abiding. Had that a long time ago. I didn't come to me in the moment. Abiding principles. So I said unshakable, I think. But try and remember abiding principles. That's good. He says here межгосударственное общение. So I suppose literally it's here. It's interstate communication. So I think I said interstate relations. I think I quite like what I said there. Okay, let's move on.
They're enshrined in the Charter. And the Founding Fathers defined these unambiguously, and clearly the priorities were sovereign equality of state.
Okay. They like in Russian, by the way, to say Всемирная организация, the world organization. I guess just the UN. Here I don't even mention it. I didn't need to, the Founding Fathers. We know we're talking about the UN. Сформулировали предельно четко и недвусмысленно. Clearly, and yeah, they like, this is a word they like in Russian, недвусмысленно. So I said unambiguously. Other alternative could be categorically. I mean, it's a bit of a, they already say chut because you can't say clearly and clearly. So maybe you just need one adjective. Maybe you don't even need the two adjectives. But yeah, it's always for недвусмысленно, unambiguously or categorically. And he talks about, so sovereign equality. Well, I think I said sovereign equality of states. So equality among sovereign states. Let's see the rest of that.
It's non-interference in internal affairs.
Non-interference in internal affairs, that's a very important idea, okay? Especially for the Russians. Know that one by word for word. Non-interference in internal affairs.
The right of peoples to self-determination.
Okay, so this is the Russian way of wording that. Народов, you can say на самоопределение, the самим определять свою судьбу. That is self-determination, essentially.
Refraining from the threat or the threat of the use of force. Political settlement of disputes.
Okay, these are sort of basic tenets of the Charter, as he says. Shouldn't threaten there's no threat of the use of force. Political dispute settlement. Actually, in the Charter, they refer to it as, they talk about, today it's talking about peaceful dispute settlement. You'll see that the wording in the Charter is pacific dispute settlement, just if you want to sound really fancy.
Looking back on the last decade, we can say that despite the complexities of the Cold War,
the прошедшие десятилетия, I said the decade, I mean it's plural, isn't it? Decades. Never mind. Despite the complexities of the Cold War,
major political shifts in today's complex world order.
Okay, so this is quite a tricky little sentence here. So this construction's piri. So I think I said despite. I think I kicked off with despite. So you can say, but notwithstanding, despite. Yeah. So it's basically, if I was to do it now in a sight translation, notwithstanding all the complexities of the Cold War period, major geopolitical changes, shifts, notwithstanding today's, now here's a word, хитросплетениях мировой политики. What did I say in the original?
Throughout this, the UN has played its mission.
I said, let me
Despite the complexities of the Cold War, major political shifts in today's complex world order. Throughout this, the UN has...
Yeah, I actually skip it, don't I? So, при сегодняшних хитросплетениях. So I looked this up, so you can say maybe the vagaries. I often sometimes use that in French. The intricacies of the current global politics. Okay.
played its mission nobly, maintaining peace.
Yeah, I was looking for some reason он достойно выполняет свою главную миссию. I remember having just stuck on trying to find достойно here. I said nobly. Okay, I said playing its mission, playing its part nobly. Yeah, that's it. So it's it's doing a decent job at fulfilling its chief mission. Maybe nobly is a good word here.
Supporting sustainable development for peoples and continents, helping overcome local crises.
Okay, that bit's fairly straightforward. Keeping the peace, supporting sustainable development, helping overcome local crises.
That's massive potential. That massive potential of the UN is still in need and serves as a good basis to keep moving forward.
Russians like talking about how the UN needs to stay востребован. Like I say, in need here. It's a word I've given quite a bit of thought to over the years. I usually say relevant. I think it's still relevant and serves as sorry. In need is okay, but it's an expression the Russians use quite a bit.
As with the international organizations and regional structures, the UN mustn't stagnate.
Okay, I had a bit of a guess here. Didn't know this word. Makes actual sense now that I look at it. So костенет, как и любая международная организация или региональная структура, ООН не должна костенеть. So I said, stagnate. So I looked it up. It means like to ossify, I guess, from the root kost. But I think my guess is the best alternative, actually. It mustn't stand idle. I think stagnate. I'm quite pleased with myself on that one.
It must reflect in its dynamics the realities of the 21st century, progressively adapt to the realities of this day and age.
Okay, another bit I like here that I've done. Okay, say последовательно адаптироваться. I said progressively adapt. I've not used that one before. That might just have come to be in the moment. Again, it's an adverb that they use a lot. Последовательно, do whatever it may be. I'm wondering if actually you could say just to keep adapting, keep doing something. In some contexts, definitely. I usually say consistently with последовательно. So, yeah. And then, okay, I'm going to treat this as a good expression that I give here for в современном мире. They often talk about the современном мире. Now, I love to say in this day and age. I think I might have mentioned this in a previous video. In the contemporary world, in the modern world, that sounds a bit hackneyed. I like saying in this day and age. Okay.
And it is really becoming more complex. It's becoming a multipolar, multidimensional world.
Okay. Only one might be a bit tricky. Многомерный, so yeah, multidimensional.
Changes taking place, obviously having an impact on the chief organ of the UN Security Council. At the debate on approaches towards its reform.
Yeah, the issue of UN reform. That's reformering. That's an issue that's been going over and over for years, decades. Reform of the Security Council, that's to say, and it's one of those, it'll never really get solved. It's just there, just to tick over, because as you probably know, so the Security Council, you've got your five permanent members: Russia, France, China, UK, and the United States, with the right to veto. And there's forever talk about reforming it, bring it into line with today's realities, you know, increasing the number of permanent members. You know, India wants to be a permanent member, Japan fancies themselves as a permanent member, Germany as well. Lots of countries think they've got a right to have a permanent membership. Africa as a whole thinks that it deserves a permanent seat on the Security Council. You have actually an initiative, it's called the Esselwini Consensus, which you'll hear that if you do meetings on Security Council reform, which is all about basically giving the continent of Africa, is it two permanent seats perhaps? At least one. They want at least one permanent seat. And it's funny, so the permanent members, we know how much they're always at each other's throats, the Russians, the US, the Chinese, whatever. But if there's one thing they really agree on, it's that they don't really want to change the Security Council. You know, there's a lot of talk that, oh yeah, we've got to change things up and all that. But at the end of the day, it all pretty much comes back. It's all going around in circles, and that's pretty much one thing that they agree on. That they're not going to make any big changes. You might add a couple of extra non-permanent members, but I can't see any new permanent members coming anytime soon. I don't think. Okay, let's go on.
Our position that the Council should better reflect the interests of all countries. The diversity of their positions is crucial. It should be based on the principle of the broadest consensus among states.
So pretty much, as I said, a lot of talk. Yeah, it's got to reflect the diversity of positions, etc.
At the same time as before, has served as a crucial link in global governance, which cannot be ensured without the permanent members maintaining their right to veto that right to the five nuclear powers.
Okay, so here Putin talks about, you know, the сохранение права вето, keeping the right to the veto. That is one of their prerogatives, as they say. It's one of the prerogatives of the permanent members. So you've got постоянные члены, so for people who aren't have much experience, so постоянные члены is the permanent members, as opposed to the non-permanent members, непостоянные члены. So, and then, again, if you're not used to UN stuff, Совбез is the short form for Security Council. Don't let that throw you. Совбез, Совет Безопасности.
Winner of the World War II winners today realistically reflects the current geopolitical balance.
Yeah, I tripped up a bit here between nuclear states and the winners of World War II. So that's what it pretty much comes down to. That right of veto for the nuclear powers, the winners of World War II, still today reflects the real military political balance.
And there is a crucial need, it's a crucial, unique instrument that prevents unilateral action that are fraught with military confrontation between the biggest states.
Okay, one thing here, который не допускает односторонних действий. So не допускать, just prevent. You know, if you're early in your career, you might be tempted to go with a doesn't allow, or you might that не might sort of lead you down the wrong way. So не допускать, prevent. Unilateral action, then they like this something's чревато, whatever it may be with. So I like to always say is fraught with. I think I use it a couple of times in this statement. So here is fraught with the direct military confrontation of the biggest states. Чревато. Often they'll talk about чревато. Опасных последствий, for example, is fraught with dangerous consequences.
Allows us to seek out compromise or at least avoid decisions that are categorically unacceptable. It needs to act within international law and not in the grey area of illegitimacy.
Okay, again, a couple of tricky constructions here, especially this last. Они в зыбкой серой зоне произвола легитимности. So, okay, so he's saying that he used to act in the framework of international law as opposed to within this grey zone. So, zibkaya is really sort of flimsy, fragile. You know, sometimes you've got to skip words, it's inevitable. His speech is delivered pretty quickly, and it's always with Putin, it's always going to be dense. So you got to skip the old adjectives here and there. And so I skip zibka, and then this word is a classic, praizvol. Often talk about praizvol, and it can be a tricky one. So unfortunately, my initial reaction is always arbitrariness. That's not a nice word. It just does not sound right. But whenever I hear praizvol, I always think first arbitrariness. So I skipped it here, and I was thinking about what a better solution would be. And in terms of a one-word solution, it's hard, you know, other than praise. Well, the idea is of it being a case of every man to himself. You could say something along the lines of not, let's say, in the flimsy grey zone, where it's every man for himself, and of illegitimacy, you know, or another option for praiseville would be where anything goes, this grey zone of where anything goes and illegitimacy. I don't think there's one word in English that really does that, praiseville, justice. So have those ideas maybe running, you know, working in your head. So every man for himself, anything goes. And if you think of a good solution yourself, by all means, feel free to put it in the comments, by the way. Okay? Let's keep going.
As diplomatic practice has shown, this instrument works. Unlike the unfortunate experience of the League of Nations, with its endless talk, declarations, without any mechanisms for genuine action, without the right of states in trouble to seek help.
Okay, sort of a bit of a retrospective now on the fate of the League of Nations, who you should know as the League of Nations is, of course, the predecessor to the United Nations, established after World War I, headquartered in Geneva, and it basically fell apart because it was it was a talking shop, which is what basically Putin is saying. Бесконечными разговорами. I just couldn't. That word has just come to me now. So it was a talking shop, endless chit chat. He's basically saying the League of Nations, but it didn't have the tools really to bring to bear any of its decisions. I think it all came to pieces when Mussolini invaded Abyssinia or Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken. That was really sort of marked the end for it. And then also with Hitler, and when Hitler seized the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. So there was a lot of talk. Some with the pre-war League of Nations, with its endless chit-chat, declarations, but without mechanisms for genuine action. So without the right of states and peoples, so as I said, got into trouble to get help or protection. Okay, so we're going to continue. This is where we are. Let's see what I said here.
Forgetting the lessons of history is short-sighted and irresponsible, and also politicized attempts to interpret the outcomes of World War II are also fraught.
Okay, so I struggled a bit with that little section, so I skipped a little bit. But I started off well enough, you know, forgetting the lessons of history are short-sighted, недальновидно, крайне безответственно, irresponsible. Now this is the bit I kind of messed up slightly. It's a tricky one, this gerundive, which basically goes from politizirovanные through to papitki, one of these classic Russian gerundives. The politicized, okay, politizirованные, основанные не на фактах, а на домыслах попытки. So it's basically these attempts that are not facts based, they're not based on facts, but rather on na domysl. For that, I like to use conjecture. By the way, that's a they often criticize, everything, reports, actions, whatever. Often things are based on conjecture, or hearsay is another alternative. But how are we going to put this little section from politicized, this gerundive from politicized through to papitki into good English? So I'd probably have to say, looking at it, on politicized, non-facts based, or based not on facts but on conjecture, attempts to, arbitrarily interpret the reasons. It's a tough one. Hearsay based, perhaps you could say politicized, non-facts based, but hearsay based. Maybe you have to repeat the based. It's tricky, that. Yeah. But anyway, remember domicile, conjecture, or hearsay.
To try and revisit the decisions of the Allies and of the Nuremberg Tribunal.
Okay, so I paraphrase a little bit. So it's often they talk about. Actually, no, for переиначивать решение конференции союзников. They do often talk about revisiting the decisions, the judgments of the Nuremberg Tribunal, where, of course, they tried the various senior Nazi war criminals. So that's a good one to have generally when the Russians do talk about that a lot when it comes to. They often talk about it at the UN in certain contexts, and they'll often criticize the West, certain parts of the West, for revisiting the decisions of the Nuremberg Tribunal. Okay.
These trying to do this is a crime to those who fought against the Nazis. It's a destructive.
Yeah, this wasn't my best bit. I didn't do this bit so well. Это не просто низость. It's like disgrace. It's just simply disgraceful, and a crime, преступление перед памятью, a crime to the memory of those who fought Nazism.
Blow against the very foundations of the post-World War order. What's particularly dangerous when global.
Yep, it's a direct destructive blow to the very основе послевоенного мира, the foundations of the post-war order.
Global stability is being sorely tested when we're seeing a degrading of the arms control system, ongoing regional.
Okay, I would deliberately. Where are we here? This подвергается серьезным испытаниям. So I said global stability is being sorely tested. I do like that phrase. Like in French, they talk about à rude épreuve. So that's generally a good little phrase to remember. But you could also say it's under serious threat. Подвергается серьезным испытаниям. So he talks here about the arms control system. I can't remember if I said in the introduction, so it's possible, one of the Putin's criticisms of the West, the Russia's criticism of the West in the last few years, is that the Americans have withdrawn from a number of the nuclear weapons agreements signed between the US and Russia. Most specifically, there's the INF Treaty, which is on, I think, intermediate and long-range missiles. That was quite an important treaty that the Americans, I think, unilaterally withdrew from. So that's a reference to that agreement, I think.
Conflicts, exacerbating threat from terrorism, from crime and drug trafficking.
Okay, a couple of interesting words here. Nie stychają regionalnie konflikty. So I said when they're continuing, these regional conflicts are continuing, perhaps a good word would be maybe a rumbling on. They rumble on. And then, okay, you got the worsening threat, обостряются угрозы, the heightened threat of terrorism, organized crime, and drug trafficking.
We've all faced fundamental new challenge, COVID, which has affected millions of people around the world. It has taken hundreds of thousands of human lives.
Okay, so I got tripped over a word here, and I was so as you say in Russian, he says the pandemia coronavirus. So I had to catch up and say yeah, just say COVID. I think I've said that before, rather than getting mixed up in the coronavirus pandemic, whatever. Just COVID, 2 syllables, and you're done. And as I say, it's an illness which has affected millions of people and has taken that which is most dear. Let's see what I said here.
Quarantine, closing of borders, creating numerous difficult problems for citizens in virtually all states. Those are realities of today.
I was almost going to go все это реалии сегодняшнего дня. I was almost going to go again with this day and age, but I thought maybe saying it twice would be laying it on a bit thick. So realities of our day. Многочисленные, by the way, создание многочисленных тяжелых проблем, yeah, creating numerous многочисленные тяжелых difficult problems.
Especially, it's particularly hard for the elderly who, due to the necessary restrictions, have had to not been able to even hug their close ones for days, even months.
Okay. So again, slightly paraphrased it here just for time. It's been particularly difficult for the older generation, okay, starszych поколения, who have due to the necessary restrictions, have at times for weeks and sometimes for months not been able to hug. I should have said their loved ones. Really, that was perhaps better. Своих близких детей, внуков, their loved ones, their children and grandchildren. See how I did this next sentence.
No, the experts are still to truly appreciate the scope of the epidemic on the economic situation, all those and its far-reaching consequences. But
Okay, эксперимент еще только предстоит в полной мере оценить. So a good one for оценить here, I don't think I said it yet, is to gauge. So the experts are still to fully gauge the scale of the socio-economic shock linked to the epidemic and all its far-reaching consequences. I think would be the best way to do that. Again, you got these little gerundive масштаб связанного с эпидемией. If you want to get that sort of mirror for mirror, like a like-for-like translation, to gauge the scale of the epidemic-linked socio-economic shock, you could probably get away with saying that. You always got a bit of poetic license when it comes to interpreting from Russian. It's just the nature of the language. You sometimes have to, as they say in French, bricoler. Something. I mean, the key thing generally with the Russians is that the meaning gets across.
today it's already clear that restoring the global economy will take a long time, a very long time, and anti-crisis measures won't necessarily work. New innovative solutions will be needed.
Okay, a couple of interesting words here. Восстанавливать экономику. I think did I say restore the economy to for revive the economy, resuscitate the economy. If you're feeling really confident, they're going to take a long time. Aprobowanie antykryzysnie miery. So for aprobowanie, you could say like the tried and trusted or proven. So you're basically saying, well, what's more, the tried and trusted anti-crisis measures, it's far from certain that they will continue to work, that they will always work. And then so another interesting word here, nie потребуется новые нестандартные решения. So I like for that when they do use that bit, is innovative solutions. What are needed are new innovative solutions.
We can only develop them together, and that is a crucial priority both for the UN and for the G20 state.
Yeah, when they talk about actually here when he says это важнейшая задача. Here, as I say, I could have just got to that is the priority for the UN. See, in English you have that instrument, don't you? The stress of the instrument, which kind of that the more or less reflects the idea of важнейшее. So I said that's the important priority for the UN, but looking back, the best way to do it would have been to say that is the priority, both for the UN, государства двадцатки, as referring to the G20. I think they refer to the G8, the Восьмерка. Okay.
States, as well as for other leading interstate organizations and regional associations who, due to the impact of the pandemic,
where have we? Yeah, межгосударственные организации. I tend to play safe with the Russian to say intrastate organizations. I guess you could say multilateral organizations. Although technically in Russian that's многосторонние организации. Yeah, here I tend to play safe. I tend to say intrastate organizations and integrational объединения associations. Whatever the difference is between those two concepts. Anyway, the Russians, for example, if Putin wants to differentiate between the two, then I feel I should probably do likewise. Переживают не лучшие времена.
Are going through tough times. There's a need for fundamentally new horizons and scales of development.
Okay. I said I quite like what the переживают не лучшие времена. They're going through tough times. Принципиально, this adverb, I will tend to say fundamentally, as a rule, fundamentally new horizons. And this масштабов развития, scales of development, I couldn't think of anything better sounding, to be honest, there in the moment. Does that mean it's okay? It's what it is, word for word, scales of development. Dimensions of development, maybe. Perspectives for development, perhaps.
This idea of a high quality integrated growth and integration of integrations is enshrined in the Russian initiative to establish a Eurasian partnership.
Okay. Couple of interesting words here, okay. It's this idea of качественного интеграционного роста. I think I say high quality integrational growth. I mean, I think when I'm going from the Russians, I hear качественного. I think you can almost say qualitative. Often when you look at a Russian translation of an English text. So the original. Oh yeah, when the Russians go and translate an official text like this into English, they will often say for kачественный, they'll say qualitative. I mean, I know it's an ugly word. You know it's an ugly word, but they seem happy with it. And hell, the customer is always right, isn't he? Integration of integration, Zalozhena, which is set forth in the Russian initiative to establish a great Eurasian partnership.
With the participation of all countries, bar none, of Asia and Europe.
Okay, I like using this sometimes, this expression. Без исключения, rather, the Russians love using this. So I thought I'd drop one of my alternatives in there, one of my solutions, bar none, with the participation of all countries, bar none, from Asia and Europe. You can say without exception, I guess. Each and every country. It's something they seem to, it's a notion they seem to like to emphasize in Russian. Everyone's part of this.
It's a purely pragmatic idea and is becoming ever more relevant. What's more,
Сугубо pragmatично. It's an important little word to know that. Сугубо, purely pragmatic, and is becoming ever more relevant.
we'd like once more to draw attention to the Russian proposal to introduce so-called green corridors.
Okay, that's all pretty straightforward. We'd like to привлечь внимание, draw attention to the Russian proposal to introduce green corridors.
Free of trade wars or sanctions. Above all, for commodities, for food.
Okay, this is an important expression that I've tended to have trouble with recently, and it's come up a lot when talking about COVID. I don't know why I've struggled with it, I just have. Для товаров первой необходимости. So it's basically essential supplies. I've been trying out various alternatives, key foodstuffs, primary products. I was doing it here. I just couldn't quite find the mot juste. But I think the best thing to go with here for товара первой необходимости is essential items, essential supplies. Make a note of that one. When you're talking about COVID, this is inevitably going to come up.
Medicine, individual personal protection systems, particularly what's needed to combat the pandemic overall.
Another important thing for COVID, средств индивидуальной защиты. And again, I remembered this literally at the end of the sentence. The PHPs, of course, aren't they? Средств индивидуальной защиты. What do we call them in English? For PHPs, I know the acronym. PHPs, that's what they are.
Cleansing international trade from barriers, prohibitions, restrictions, illegitimate sanctions could be a good spur for reinvigorating global growth and cutting unemployment.
Okay. A couple of things I want to point out here. Okay, so yeah, cleansing. Okay, this whole sentence. Cleansing, clearing, maybe. Freeing global trade from barriers, запретов, prohibitions, bans, ограничения, restrictions, illegitimate sanctions, could be a good. Okay, so подспорьем. I actually talked about spur. Maybe because I heard spore. It's like what I want to talk about here is, I mentioned earlier the decision whether to go with the sort of the like-for-like construction, like mirroring the syntax in the Russian, or going for the more natural English-sounding construction. So I went for the like-for-like. I said that could be a good spur for восстановление глобального роста. Okay, for restoring global growth, for boosting global growth. But then I was thinking about it later, and then I was thinking, what would be a good sort of more natural English way of saying this? And it occurred to me, it could be a good way of kick-starting global growth. For start хорошим подспорьем. It's sort of just a slightly paraphrase it, but it sounds more natural English. It could be a good way to kickstart or jumpstart global growth. So there's all that constant battle that goes on with Russian, whether to go for the sort of like-for-like translation or just to play about with it a little. And I think it often depends on, it depends how confident you're feeling, depends on the difficulty of the text, you know, how much of a pressure situation, how of the meeting itself is a high level meeting. So yeah, so those are just a couple of ideas.
According to experts, full or partial reduction of employment in the second quarter of this year is the equivalent to losing 400 million jobs. We must do our utmost.
Okay, that came through pretty well. Ekvivalentna. So, according to experts, pacjentkam experta. There's always a chance here, pacjentkam. You don't need the oценкам. I think it's according to experts. According to expert assessments, estimates, but you don't need the noun. Full or partial loss of jobs in the world in the second quarter this year. Ekvivalentna, okay, is equivalent to, is tantamount to losing, okay, 400 million рабочих мест, jobs. And so this finishes.
For that unemployment not to be a permanent factor, that people can be able to feed their children and not fall into poverty and lose all hope.
Okay, so yeah, he's quite quick, he's quite rapid at this point where he speaks. So again, I have to drop words here and there. This section here, нужно делать все. Just looking at it now, if I was to do a sight translation, you know, we need to do our utmost, or just simply делать все, чтобы. We need to ensure that unemployment doesn't become застойный. Now, I think I said doesn't become a permanent feature. Now, another alternative, doesn't become the norm, or doesn't become chronic. So застойный means it just becomes chronic. It's never ending. So yeah, you got to find a good alternative there. What I said, permanent features, okay. So again, you got to find a nice English way of saying it, so that people can go back to work and they can обеспечивать свои семьи. They can provide for their families. Sort of vivid this idea here. Не оказались в тисках бедности. Тисках is like the pincers of poverty. So I had to, just paraphrase a little bit. I said did I say to avoid poverty, steer clear of poverty. Без перспективы жизни, so that they shouldn't lose all hope in life. They shouldn't lose all perspective or hope. So that's a good text, and I'd encourage you to try doing the whole text. Putin's statements. That's a good text. So with that, I'll now, as usual, give you my 3 highlights of the text, the 3 things to really remember, to take away from this text. So yeah, the first highlight, as it were, my 3 highlights from this text. First one would be this word, произвол. I would really encourage you to think about that word, find just alternatives of what we talked about, you know, a free-for-all, anything goes, every man for himself, those sort of ideas. And also when they use произвольно, when they use it as an adjective or as an adverb, like down here, произвольно трактовать, arbitrarily. Again, I'm not a big fan of arbitrary, but you've also got high-handed, which I like a bit more. So that's the first highlight. Then the second highlight I would give you is I can't remember exactly where it was in the text. I don't have a современном мире. In this day and age, I really like that expression. So give it a try. And then the third and final highlight, this is important for me that I've got to make a point myself of remembering, is this товар первой необходимости. This is a really important concept in this brave new world that we live in, and generally. So yeah, essential items, essential supplies. Make a note of those three things. There's a couple of other things that I was thinking about highlighting, but I like those three. So that brings us to the end of that statement. There's so much with the Russians that I could talk about. I think I might make an episode a bit further down the line. A part of being able to do the Russian statement smoothly is being able to put yourself in the shoes of the Russian delegation or the Russian government and see the world from their perspective. See how they see things taking place around the world and what their view of it is. And if you can understand the way they interpret the world, various events, goings on around the world, you're halfway. I mean, it's going to make your life so much easier when it comes to interpreting texts like this by Putin or by Lavrov. If you already know the mindset, you're halfway to getting the text. I think at some point I will do an episode specially devoted maybe to the mindset, the Russian mindset. So yes, with that, I think that brings us to an end. So just remember, in conclusion, remember to press the thumbs up button if you like the episode. Press subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And as I say in the description, you've got everything that you need to be getting on with. You've got the link to the to Putin's speech, the original. You have the link to the text, to the hard copy. So give it a try and then watch the show and see if there's any new stuff that you can learn from me. So that brings us to the end. And as usual, I'll conclude by say goodbye to Ludmila the Matryoshka. Bye-bye, Ludmila. Episode 6 of the Interpretation Station is adjourned.
The train is now leaving the interpretation station. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Until next time, folks.